Hey folks, Neil from AppleiPodParts.com here, and my colleague Damien and I are going to show you an iPhone 6 screen replacement. Now, one of my videos, we don't cut anything out, and actually I'm going to slow some of these parts down for you because my colleague here doesn't day in, day out. Professional, and he's too quick for even my voice. So the two pentalobe screws down here, we remove using a pentalobe screwdriver. They can be quite fiddly, and you need a decent tool, otherwise they round them off quite easily. And you can find all the tools and parts and everything you need at AppleiPodParts.com. Yes, of course, I'm going to plug our site. You can also use the 10% discount using YouTube on our site as checkout. We use a tool here called the iSesamo, which is a spring steel tool, which is absolutely brilliant on our site. You go in under the home button, but either side of the home button, and then on the corners, you go in and you give it a slight twist, and the screen pops up. And as you can see, with the phone on its side, it opens like a book. One side, and all the cables are on the top, so you've got no trip hazards. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to disconnect the battery. It's always best to do that, and how we do this is these two screws underneath this bracket, we pop these out and the bracket lifts up, exposing the connector. Now I always say, obviously, be careful, you must ensure that each screw that comes out goes exactly in the same hole when it goes back in, because if you put the wrong screw in the wrong hole, okay, it will trash the board and it could kill your phone or parts of your phone or cause overheating, which is really messy. So using either an iSesamo or the little fingertip, you go under there and you'll be a little bit more gentle than Damien. Like I said, he's a professional at this. So the 5 screws at the top we're going to undo to lift the bracket. Now this will expose all 4 screen connections and allow you to part the screen from the phone itself. Now this one that he's undoing here, that's one major screw that if you put a long screw in, so many people do this, if you put one of the, say for instance this screw into the other hole, it will go in, but it will go too far, it will score the main board, and it will destroy a track that will stop all manner of things happening on your phone, and it's nigh and impossible to repair. It's microscopic damage, and it will nail your phone. Once the last screw is undone, these are crosshead screws by the way, like Phillips, the plate will pop off, and you expose an awful lot of connections under there. He's using a pair of anti-static tweezers. Again, you can find those on the tools section on our website, AppleiPodParts.com, if you're in doubt, of course. So these connections, he's using a spudger. Yeah, you guessed it. But what I'd say is make sure you're doubly careful when you go into these, because all those minuscule chips that you'll see in a minute underneath these, around these connections, are so small. Like, look at how many there are. If you happen to knock one of those off by accident, you're into problems. Now we can sort that, but it's a really costly exercise involving a highly specialised guy and a microscope. So be incredibly careful when you are removing connections. I can't emphasise that enough. So we're going to transfer all the things from the old screen to the new screen because they don't come fully furnished, and especially the finger ID button. You want to be transferring that over, otherwise, yeah, it's not going to work. The home button here is held in by a bracket. He's undoing one of the screws. The screen's obviously stuck to the mat, and again, you must make sure you put the right screws back in. And there's a screw missing here. Now this is a fascinating one. Damien picks up the rear casing, and sure enough, it's never been opened before. There's the screw. Now if you've got a screw that's missing in a hole that you know it's never been opened before, have a look in the phone, because sometimes the vibration does do this. We see it way more often than you'd think, which is a bit scary considering it's waving around in those electronics. He's continuing removing this bracket, lifts the bracket up, and what you have is the home button is plugged in, and he's going to use his thumbnail. You can use a spudger or a pair of tweezers to just unclip that little block connector, just like the screens. And that clips into what is like an extension cable that runs all the way up the back of that metal shield. He's using the iSesamo to go underneath the actual connection it plugs into and just releases the glue. So it's going between the glue and and the home button. So the home button is actually glued down to the frame. It just releases the glue, home button pops out, and what you're left with is the screws here. We're going to remove the metal plate. So there's 3 up one side, 3 up the other. And like I said, we've got screw guides and magnetic trays and all sorts for this. You need to make sure that what you take out goes back in the right holes. So 3 down this side, and then to release the bracket finally, we're going to go for that top metal bracket you see there that holds all the earpiece and sensor and camera guts in. So 1, 2, these screws. Again, he's making sure they go in the right place. 3, that's the top plate connection as well. The earpiece plate comes off. You can then lift the cable, and what you have underneath that is a cable that runs along. It's the microphone, which just plugs out there, the camera, and the proxy sensor that detects your face when you put your phone to your face, and it also blanks the phone out. That's key. So he's gently lifting these out, and what happens is, and what he's showing you there is a little plastic bracket. That one and the one that's already on the deck should be attached to the screen. They hold the camera and the proxy sensor in place. Sometimes the proxy sensor gets stuck in that bracket and stuck to the screen, and if you pull it too hard, the sensor will stay in the screen like he's pointed out, but the cable will come away in your fingers, which means you've yanked the sensor off the cable and you're needing another part. The microphone, that little gold block, is there, and again the iSesamo gets in, just lifts the microphone out of a little rubber hole, and the whole cable comes away. Fascinating stuff, eh? So that's the extension cable, so that the home button plugs into that, and that runs up the metal shield. We're going to get, you can use the iSesamo or a pair of tweezers to go under the glue, and that's underneath the glue that holds it to the frame, and away the frame goes. The shield. There you have it. We no longer need that screen. In comes the new screen. Yeah, AppleiPodParts.com. You know the score. A discount code there, don't forget that. YouTube for 10%. You peel that piece of plastic off, you wouldn't believe how many people leave that on. There really there's no need for it. It's just to protect it while it's not in use. So it's pretty much as was in reverse, as we did it. You make sure that all these holes line up. You gently put it down, and I always say, if you have to force it, just don't. This little connector here for the screen, the LCD like array, that goes underneath this metal shield. It doesn't hold it tight, but it just goes underneath it. And we put all those screws back in as they came out. As I said, it's a bit like doing the strip but in reverse and making sure. Now, I'm an enormous fan of the fact that if it shouldn't be in there, it wouldn't be in there. So if it didn't need to be in there, should I say, it wouldn't be in there, because you imagine how many millions of little bits of tape or little screws that Apple could save themselves if it didn't. So I would say everything you take out must go back in. No half measures, no missing out, no cutting corners, because it will affect something. It could be something that you really would, it could be like antenna signal by 5% or whatever, but it's all in there for a reason. Apple wouldn't put it in there otherwise. You'd save 5 million screws. That's quite a lot to save if you didn't need it. So the shield's on. I'm jabbering on. And here we have on the new screen, you've got a bit of blue plastic that's protecting the earpiece mesh from the behind, and the microphone also goes in there. So he's going to remove that. And in this, you can see he's pointing out the microphone there, the little clear bracket for the sensor as well. Sometimes they come on screen, sometimes they don't. They do on this one, so he's removed it from the cable. But you've got the front camera there, and it's a little bit of, there's like a foam cover that goes around it, stops the dust from creeping in. It's just misplaced. So he's just refitting that around the outside of the camera, so when it's all together, he hasn't got a piece of black rubber across the FaceTime camera, obscuring the view. It's all in the detail, you see. All in detail. So the cable we're going to insert, and it should find its home quite easily. The microphone first of all. The little hole on the microphone, actually, there's a tiny hole that detects your voice when you're talking on speakerphone. That lines up with a hole, and you'll be able to see it's quite obvious that we've peeled that blue tab off. And then gently put in with your finger. You're going to locate the sensor and the proxy sensor and eventually the camera, but the proxy sensor goes in there, and then the earpiece with the tiny little spring contacts. You might want to pause it just to see what the orientation, but again the contacts touch to the dots on the actual cable. Hold that in place with one finger. You bring in the bracket gently, you quick whip it away, put the bracket in and secure it with a screw. Make sure that there was a bit of springiness there because the actual electrical contacts on the earpiece it's just gold springs that touch onto the cable, and that's how it all connects together. So the springiness is okay. I'm going to tighten those screws down onto it, and we know that it's all sound. If you happen to put it together and it doesn't work, you've either got damage to the cable or those aren't lined up, but there's not a lot of there's not real ways where you can get it misaligned. So we pick up the home button. It's got that rubber gasket around it. We make sure that it's a bit clean because you do get a bit of finger gaff down there, and that rubber actually kind of, you can buy. I mean, that's a rubber gasket. You can replace them or you can reuse yours. Depends what yours is like. There we go. We peel it off, making sure that you go underneath that cable. Because if you try and yank it across that cable, the cable could snap and your fingerprint ID will never work again. You can get new gaskets, as we're about to use on our site, AppleiPodParts.com, if you didn't know already. So we're going to get a new one of those gaskets. And as I mentioned, you need to make sure that all the screws that you take out, you know exactly where they're going to go back in. Otherwise you can do more damage than you know. So the gasket out of our stores and obviously off of our website, you've got to feed the cable through and then fit the button to it. Voila. There we go. And then you push the home button through, and you've got to be absolutely kid gloves with that cable, because like I say, once it's broken, your finger ID is pooped forever. The bracket goes on top, and then we refit these screws as per the coming out. But this time we won't. The screw will actually go into it and not sit in the iPhone, which is quite amusing. There you go, looking beautiful and nearly ready to go. The Damien there is just making sure that it's clicking okay before we screw it back together. There's nothing jamming or we jam in or caught up anywhere. So we've got the phone ready. It's still powered off. We give it a bit of a clean and a bit of a tap out just in case there's any more screws in there or anything like that. In fact, interestingly, we've seen some devices that have got extra screws in there, and I'm assuming when they build it so fast that if they lose a screw, instead of looking for it, they just smash another one in. That's quite rare. So we're going to put the connectors down here. I'm actually going to show you a zoomed in version of that as well, because he does it so fast, it's incredible. So here we go. I'm going to drop in, guys. You know what I'm going to say. Make sure those right screws are going in the right place. Too long means damage. So we're nearly done. Obviously he's just finishing putting those screws off, but we've already seen him do that. Plug the battery in with your finger, kind of finds the connection nicely. Press the power on button, and now we're going to function test it to make sure that all is well and good before you do the final connection for the batteries and the screen down, so that you don't have to pop it open one more time. So with it all tested and working, make sure you don't wiggle the screen too much and strain the cables. We're going to turn it off, reopen it, we're going to refit that battery connector with the 2 screws, and then we're going to refit the screen down, and all is going to be well. So there you go. If you've followed this and you've watched it and you've actually stuck with my rambling, you have most likely replaced your iPhone 6 screen to perfection. Congratulations and well done. So again, closes like a book. Follow your fingers down either side. You don't have to force it. It just pops back into place. Nice reassuring pop, 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 pop. You go along the top. You have a quick look around all the way around the outside before you put the final 2 screws in. Another reassuring kind of press down. Again, if you've got to force it, you'll crack the screen. But if you've got to force it, you've got a problem. So again, take a walk away, take a breath, have a cup of tea, whatever you want. Come back to it, have another go, but open it up, see what the problem is. 2 pentalobe screws in the bottom. Power it back on just to make double sure that it's all well. And the final thing is, don't forget to peel that plastic off. It may look like a nice screen guard, but what it does is cover the earpiece, so you won't be able to hear anyone. I'm Neil at AppleiPodParts.com. Thanks for watching and good luck. Remember, please like and share and subscribe to our channels for more guides that are coming up, and you can get all the parts and the tools AppleiPodParts.com. Nearly forgot it, including the YouTube discount. YouTube gets you 10% off.